Hello, I'm Dr. Faye Hargrove, and welcome to part 3 of our 2020 Letting Go series. If you have not already watched parts 1 and 2, it might be a good idea at this time to go back and watch them because I laid the foundation for this video and the ones to follow in those first 2 sessions. In this session, we will go through an actual intervention to release the sadness from your memory storage system, which I call your timeline. This will be a good time to grab something to write on, because I want you to think about the statement, I feel sadness about. And when you can identify at least one thing, when you think about it at this moment, it still brings you a feeling of sadness. I'd like for you to just jot down something about that. It could actually be one word. So go ahead and grab something to write on, jot down the response to the statement, I feel sadness about, and just restart the video when you're done. Welcome back. When we come back off the timeline, I'm going to ask you to look at what you just wrote and notice how your feelings have changed. So in this session, we will go through an intervention to release the sadness from your memory storage system, again, which I call your timeline, and resolve the root cause or the source of the issue that's creating the sadness. Now, if you haven't already viewed the first and the second video, please stop and go back, because this one is not going to make sense to you if you haven't had the groundwork laid from sessions 1 and 2. So let's talk about sadness. Today I had a conversation with a friend who told me her mother was on several types of medication for depression, and she said nothing's working. I asked her the source of her mother's sadness, and without hesitation, she described a family situation that involved some tension between my friend's mother and my friend's sister. Listen, we cannot medicate away an unresolved issue. When the medication wears off, the issue is still there. Here's another point. Even though it may have been perfectly natural for you to feel sadness about a specific event at the time that it occurred, it's not necessary for you to hold on to the sadness. And let me make a quick note about grief. It's natural to feel a sense of loss when somebody that we care about is no longer with us. Sometimes it can be a very painful loss because we miss the person, we miss the role they played in our lives, and sometimes there's a feeling of a gap or a hole there that's painful to us. However, sometimes people confuse grief with the memory, and some people believe that letting go of the grief surrounding the loss of a loved one is the same thing as letting go of their memory. Well, in fact, it's just the opposite. When it's not painful to recall a memory of someone you love, then you're more likely to spend more time thinking about them. And when you do think about them, what you will recall are the happy times, the joyful memories, and you'll find yourself smiling when you think about them. You know, I often make it a habit after my client has released sadness to ask them about a loved one that they've lost. And so if it was a brother or a sister, I'll say, well, tell me about your brother. And after they've released the sadness, the first thing that happens is that they smile. And they will tell me his name, or they'll start to tell me some wonderful things about that person, and they're smiling in the process and remembering the joy and the joyful memories that they had. Well, that's possible because when you let go of the pain, it gives you permission to feel good about the person. And when you let go of the pain or the grief surrounding the loss of a loved one, it's not the same thing as letting go of the memory. So let's move on. Let me remind you of something that I briefly discussed in the first 2 videos, and that is the distinction between your conscious and your unconscious mind. So in this process, I'd like for you to trust your unconscious mind and allow it to do all of the work for you. Just as it's blinking for you right now, and breathing for you right now and digesting the last meal that you had and beating your heart right now. So your job is just to sit back, relax, and take on the role of observer. And just observe how your unconscious mind will respond to my suggestions, and we'll get the work done. So is it okay to let go? Is it okay to let your unconscious mind let go of any stored grief and sadness that you might have today, and for you to know it consciously? Just give yourself permission. That's right. So in session 2, we discovered how your timeline was set up. Is it back to front? Is it left to right? Is it down to up? Where's your timeline? In session 2, we did a test drive on your timeline to help you know how to navigate through this guided imagery exercise that you're about to go through. Let me remind you of the process before we actually begin. So remember, I will ask you to consider where's the root cause memory for the first time in your existence that you experienced sadness. And then I will ask you to trust your unconscious mind to float you out over your timeline and notice that the very first memory of sadness is way down there and you're going to stop right above it. And I will talk you through the letting go of the sadness. Then we will float down into the memory and we will allow you to get the learning. So the learning is the new insight or the new way of viewing that situation under a new perspective. The third thing we're going to do is give you an opportunity to forgive anything that needs to be forgiven and resolved about that situation. So the only thing that is required of you is for you to sit comfortably with your eyes closed and listen. Then you can trust your unconscious mind to actually do the work for you. Now, do not do this while you're driving. So, are you ready to find the root cause memory for your sadness? Were you to know the very first memory of sadness, the first time in your existence, first time in your timeline that you experienced sadness and you stored it along with the memory, was it before your birth, during your birth, or after your birth? Allow the answer to emerge from that back room, from your unconscious mind, and just answer that. Was it before your birth, during your birth, or after your birth? What popped in your head? If it was after your birth, at what age? If it was before your birth, was it in the womb or before? And if it was during your birth, we can just trust your unconscious mind to float you out over your timeline to the very first memory of sadness, because guess what? You were there. And if you were there having an experience, your unconscious mind recorded it. So what number popped in your head for the first memory of sadness if it was after your birth? Excellent. Now, we're going to trust your unconscious mind the same way you did in the last process. So let's allow it to take you to the perfect, appropriate place for you to let go of the first stored sadness. So just relax in your chair and let's get back in touch with your timeline. Excellent. So close your eyes. Imagine you can leave your body sitting right there on the chair. You can float your mind way up high and get in touch with your timeline, just like you did when we let go of anger. So you're floating way up high, face the direction of your past, and just trust your unconscious mind to float you all the way back over your timeline until you're high above that first memory of sadness. So just float. Just notice your unconscious mind is floating you out over your timeline to the very first event, the very first memory of sadness. Go all the way out there now. And when you notice that your unconscious mind has stopped you high above that event, then just look down and notice. Now, is it okay for your unconscious mind to get the learning from that situation so that it would allow you to quickly and easily let go of the sadness from that memory, and so that the lesson can serve you in the future? Is it okay? Good. So notice that your unconscious mind will release the sadness into the balloon. Make sure you're high up and notice all the sadness go into the balloon. And notice the balloon the wind whisking that balloon away from you off into the distance, higher and further. And in a few seconds, the balloon will pop. And when it does, all of the sadness will be gone with the balloon as it floats higher and further away. Excellent. Now you're still up high. You're still up high above that root cause memory. So float back a few minutes before that event began. You're high above the memory a few minutes before it began, so turn. Let's look down at the situation. So there it is, all the way down there in your timeline. You're up high, looking down at it before it started. And let's check your body right now. Let's do a live body scan and notice your feelings in your body right now. Where's the sadness? You let it all go, didn't you? Excellent, excellent. So let's float right down into your timeline, right down into that memory. And let's notice what's happening. See it through your own eyes. See what you saw and hear what you heard. Notice whatever there is to notice about that situation. And let's get the learning. The new insight will allow you to have a different perspective about that event. So are you noticing what's happening in that situation? I wonder if there is anyone in that situation that you need to forgive. Can you go ahead and forgive them? Okay, go ahead and forgive them. Excellent. So you've released the sadness, you've gotten the new insight, and if forgiveness was appropriate, you've forgiven, right? So let's come back above the timeline. We just cut the clasp on that string of beads. So you're going to float back to now. And as you do, just notice your unconscious mind rearranging all of your past memories, letting go of all of the sadness from all of your past memories, letting go. Stay up high as you float on back to now, and take as much time as you need. Letting go, just noticing, observing your unconscious mind rearranging all of your past memories, letting go of all of the sadness, letting go. You're keeping the new insights so they can serve you in the future, and you're letting go of all the sadness, floating all the way back to now. Excellent. Great job. Stay up high as you float back to now, letting go. Just notice your unconscious mind rearranging all of your past memories, letting go of all of the sadness from all of your memories as you stay up high and float back to now. Take as much time as you need. And when you get back to now, you can float down into the room. When you're back above now, float down into the room and open your eyes without the sadness. Great, excellent job. Floating all the way back to now. Excellent. All the way back to now, letting go. And when you arrive above now, come on down into the room and open your eyes without the sadness. Welcome back. How was that? You did a great job. You released the sadness. You got the learning. You forgave if that was appropriate. You've had an opportunity to go through the second trip in the balloon process. Yay! So we're going to do that 3 more times. You've released anger. You've released sadness. So the next trip we'll take on your timeline will be to release your fears and your anxieties. Now, I'd like you to look back at what you wrote for the statement, I feel sadness about. So let's stop for a moment. Let's pause for a moment and go back and look at that. And let's check your feelings. How have your feelings actually changed about that situation? You wrote something down which indicated that you had a sadness about it. It could be that you no longer have any sadness and it's no longer an issue for you, and you might feel neutral about it now. Or it could be that now you're feeling something else. That maybe you can or maybe you can't put a label to it, but you're feeling differently. If you're feeling differently at all, then count that as success. Remember, we have 3 more sessions that will give you an opportunity to release any other emotions that you might be feeling about that situation. Now, during the last trip on your timeline, you released the sadness and you got the learning from the event. What was the learning? So this is the learning from the root cause memory. During the trip on your timeline, you released the sadness from the root cause memory and you got the learning. What was that learning? Whatever issue needed to be resolved in that event, you now have resolution, and you now have a completely different perspective about it. Do you want to take a few minutes to jot down the learning, jot down that new perspective? You can go ahead, stop the video, hit the pause button. I'll be here when you get back. Okay, welcome back. You've done another great job. You released the sadness, you got the learning, you forgave, you jotted down the new perspective and the new learning. So now in the future, that learning will be there to serve you. So just one more thing. Let's think about the future. Let's get back in touch with your timeline so we can take a look at the future. So closing your eyes. Maybe you can close your eyes and float back up high above your timeline. However, this time, let's face the direction of the future. Now, looking out over your future, but at no specific time, just some unspecified time in the future, can you notice a time in the future where you might have the sadness again? Can you notice a time where that sadness might be there in the future? You can't, can you? Excellent. Great. So you can come on back down into the room and open your eyes. Great job. You released anger, you've released sadness, and now you have a whole new perspective on the events from your past. In the next video, we will release stored fears and anxieties, which are future-based fears. In session 5, we will focus on releasing guilt. And in the final video in this series, we will release limiting decisions. That involves all of the self-doubt and the insecurities that you might be harboring. We are going to make 2020 the best year ever. Now, you might be tempted to jump to the last video, but please resist doing that. You'll get the best benefit out of restoring your confidence in the last video if we've done this process together in sessions 1 through 5. So I hope this helped you to face the new year without the anger and any sadness from previous years. Don't forget to hit the like and the subscribe buttons and turn on your alerts so you'll get a notification when I post the next session to release fears and anxieties. We will see you next time.